Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another interview for the Art of Sherlock Holmes. It's an author interview today, and today we have Dan Victor. Good evening, Dan.
Hi, how are you?
Or should I say good morning, because presumably it's morning or early afternoon where you are. Where are you dialing in from, Dan?
Los Angeles, California. It's about a little past 10:30 here this time.
Well, it's dark outside here in the UK. It's 6:30 at night here. It's been a lovely sunny day, but it's a bit cold. It's a bit fresh. What's the weather like in LA?
Actually, it's morning now, and it's a beautiful day. We've had a lot of rain, though, and in the outskirts of Los Angeles, sunny California, there's even been some snow. So it's been quite dramatic the last few weeks.
I did notice that there was several of my friends, Sherlockian friends in California, that had been sharing little videos and little memes of snow, because it's not that common where you guys are.
No, not at all. I'm old enough to remember when I was a little kid in 1949. I remember looking out the window and seeing actual snow within the city limits, but it hasn't quite gotten there this year.
Fantastic. Well, why don't we start with how you got involved with Sherlock Holmes for the first time?
When I was a kid, I don't remember how old exactly, somebody gave me an anthology of Sherlock Holmes stories, and I started to read them, and I was hooked. And then I discovered the Basil Rathbone films, and I was even more hooked. And I continued on. It turns out that in my freshman year at college, I wrote in my freshman English class, I wrote a term paper on Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. So I seem to have been involved with it at an early age and continued on through.
Fantastic. And if we move on to your writing, I think the first place I wanted to start was with the MX Book of New Sherlock Holmes Stories, which is our large anthology that we've been publishing for the last 5 years. And you're one of the most featured writers in the collection. So you've actually been in 6 of the volumes.
That's right. I'm pleased and proud and happy to work with David Markham, the editor, who seems to like my work. So that works out very well for me.
In fact, the next interview that I'll be doing a little bit later today will be with David. And he's very strong in his opinions on your writing. And I wanted to come back to that in just a moment. But just a quick mention that, of course, we're up to 12 volumes now of the MX Book of New Sherlock Holmes Stories. It's by far the largest collection of its kind in the world, with over 100 writers involved with it. And David has been editing it from the beginning. In fact, it was David's idea. David had a vision of trying to promote and bring forward modern writing, but in a very traditional way. So under his stewardship, this has become a very, very popular collection. The last 7, I think, volumes have had starred reviews from Publishers Weekly. So there's not much higher praise than that. And we've got 3 more volumes coming in May. So it will be up to 15 volumes. And do you plan to submit any more for future volumes, Dan?
I'm not sure that I'm going to be working on short stories. I still have another idea for a novel in the back of my mind. I'll see how it all works out for me.
Fantastic. Well, look, why don't we touch on one of your novels? I know that we're not going through your writing in a very chronological order here, but I wanted to touch your standalone novel first. And here's a quote from David. And David often refers to you as one of the best pastiche writers of the modern era, Dan, which is pretty high praise considering there's over 100 writers in the MX collection. And this one's set partly in Russia, Shadows of St Petersburg. Can you tell us a little bit about this book?
Yeah, I should say from a general perspective, and I'll touch on this if we talk about my American literati novels, but I am a retired teacher, and I find my teacher role coming out in the work that I write, that I create. I'm interested in various authors, and I had always wanted to get involved with Dostoevsky's novel Crime and Punishment. So I read that, and I reread that. I listened to the audio book, and I decided that there were murders in that novel that could be brought more to be made more contemporary. And so I have a recreation of the Dostoevsky murders in London, and of course Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson have the challenge of trying to solve them. I even bring characters from the original book into my own novel.
And your links with Russia go back a long way. There's a lovely story, I think, we had a chat about it, about you published a book a few decades ago, which was released in Russia, I understand.
Yeah, my first Sherlock Holmes pastiche, which was published by St. Martin's Press 25 years ago, dealt with the little-known American novelist and journalist David Graham Phillips, who was murdered in real life in Gramercy Park in New York. The gun was supposedly a six-shooter. There were 7 bullets fired. And so that raised the question of who really did it. And Phillips's sister in my novel goes to London and asks Sherlock Holmes to come out of retirement and to come back to New York and help solve the murder. And the way I got involved in it was when I was telling the story to a class of mine, and some kid who knew that Phillips, because I told them, that Phillips had attacked the United States Senate, accused them of treason for not representing the American people. This kid suggested maybe somebody in the Senate killed him, and the wheels started turning. And I thought, gee, Sherlock Holmes could get involved in that. So I wrote that. And then a bunch of years later, I was contacted by a Russian publisher, and they decided they wanted to publish it in Russian. And they actually did. And with your help and with David Markham's help, and with my wife traveling to St. Petersburg, I was actually able to get a copy of the book.
There's nothing more special than having your writing appear in another language. I think it's fantastic. Very few authors are able to read it in the translated language, but there's a sweet story. Dan Andriaco, who's one of the other Sherlockian writers involved with MX, his novels have been translated into Italian, and Dan speaks Italian. So he's actually was quite pleased because he was able to say, yeah, they've done a pretty good job.
That's good. More than I can do.
Well, in fact, moving on to the American Literati Service, we're very we're very proud that this series has been picked up by Mondadori, which is the largest publisher in Italy, for their I Giallo Mondadori series, the Yellow novel series. And tell us a little bit about this series. So it started with the final page of Baker Street, and here's a couple of quotes from the Historical Novel Society. Very, very great reviews from them. Tell us a bit about the series. What links them together?
Well, again, my teaching background, I was an American Lit high school teacher, and I discovered that a number of American authors were, in fact, in London at the time that Sherlock Holmes was hanging out there. And so I invented these different stories in which Sherlock Holmes met various American authors. The final page of Baker Street deals with Raymond Chandler, and I should point out that everyone thinks of Raymond Chandler as an American mystery writer who set his stories here in Los Angeles, but as a kid, he actually grew up in London, went to Dulwich College, and in my book, he serves as the page boy at Baker Street with Sherlock Holmes, and that's how he gets introduced to crime stories. The Baron of Breed Place is about Stephen Crane. 17 Minutes to Baker Street, Mark Twain. The Outrage at the Diogenes Club is based on a novel, The Assassination Bureau, written by Jack London. And my latest, Sherlock Holmes and the London Particular, deals with Richard Harding Davis and his story In the Fog, which was the London Particular was, I guess, the nickname that Londoners gave very thick fogs.
Fantastic. And one of the things I love about your series is that there is that kind of link for the fans. So We get a lot of feedback from the Sherlockian fans that like the first book, the second book, and it's that linking back to the writer theme. Quite often I do it myself with mystery fiction. When you find a writer that you like, you just read through all of their work. So we were over the moon when you said that book 5 was on the way, and it comes out in April. So we should talk a little bit about the Art of Sherlock Holmes. After all, this is what we're here for. I've got my West Palm Beach t-shirt on, which has now definitely become my lucky t-shirt for these interviews. And this is the West Palm Beach edition. So the concept is absolutely fantastic, ever so simple. Conceived by Phil Growick, who's a two-time Sherlock Holmes novel writer in his own right. And Phil was a New Yorker, and he's now living in West Palm Beach. Got involved with the art community there and the charity community there in West Palm, and came up with this amazing idea to give local artists a Sherlock Holmes story and ask them to create a piece of art from it. So book 1 is complete and will be coming out in May. And you're one of the featured authors in there, The Adventure of Smith Mortimer Succession. Tell us a bit about the story.
This comes from an anthology that was based on stories that the original Sherlock Holmes canon refers to, but doesn't actually present. So Watson makes a reference to the Smith-Mortimer succession, and I decided to write a story about that. It deals with who comes next in a wealthy family's list of heirs, I guess. And it involves mistaken identity, which I don't want to reveal because that's part of the story. It does take Holmes and Watson back to the Reichenbach Falls, where Sherlock Holmes had his encounter with Professor Moriarty. So there's some old ground retread, and there's some new family connections that I hope go unsuspected until the end. It was a fun story to write, and I'm really thrilled to be part of this entire project.
And you've touched upon several of the things that Sherlockian fans absolutely love. They love references back to the canon. They like to retread old ground, and they particularly like it when new writers who speak in the voice of Watson fill in gaps that Conan Doyle left. So these references to things that then don't get explained or don't get fleshed out by Conan Doyle, when they're done well, the Sherlockian fans absolutely love it, because it's kind of filling in where Conan Doyle would have filled in if he'd had the time, is the kind of theory, I guess. And I wanted to ask you the question, I ask it from all of the authors. What's the feeling like that somebody has taken your story and the plot lines from your story and spent several weeks creating a piece of art from it?
Well, in the first place, it's a very humbling experience, or a very humbling feeling. You sense when you write something that other people are going to read it, but when someone creates a work of art out of it, it goes all the more towards making you feel that you're able to affect people, to touch people. I had a similar kind of feeling when I heard my first Audible book, that I wrote this thing, but somebody else was interpreting it for me. And I feel that way about the art, that I have my own view in my head. I'm looking forward to seeing how the artist recreates what I've put into words, what the artist puts into his medium or her medium.
It's been a fascinating experience, and I know that Phil has deliberately picked some very, very different artists within this. You've got landscape painters, you've got traditional portrait painters. We have, I think, 3 sculptors, and we even have a tattoo artist as well. Yes. And several of the artists within the book also do murals as well. So there's some quite incredible. We've been doing interviews with all of the artists. So on our YouTube channel, you can look at the videos there. And we're doing a bunch more videos with the interviews with the artists next week. Now, in fact, we have kept everything's secret. We've shown a bit of a glimpse of all of the art to everybody. And we haven't even told, I appreciate how exciting but frustrating it must be, Dan. We've even kept it from the authors who the artists are, so because we want to keep that mystique going for a little while, but we will be letting everybody know relatively soon, and you'll get to see that art. But one of the reasons we've been a little bit secretive with it is that we're actually going to be bringing all of the art together. We've had a fantastic response to the project from the West Palm community, and we're actually going to be launching an exhibition on the 9th of May at a high-end gallery called the Anne Norton Sculpture Gardens. And all 15 pieces of art will come together and be exhibited. They've all been priced up, and I have no doubt that all the art will go. And it's going to be an exhibition for several weeks. On the 25th of May, we're going to cut live to the gallery from a very special event at Undershaw. So Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's former home, which is now the home of Stepping Stone School, we're going to be having an amazing event there, and we're going to be involving as many people as we can, including yourself via web, to get involved in a big Sherlock Holmes event there. And as part of that, we'll cut live to the gallery to meet the artist and to see the art. So really looking forward to catching up with you. Once you've seen the painting, I'm going to talk to all of the authors to see what their reactions are there to the art. And it's been fantastic speaking to you, Dan. And I look forward to seeing the next novel coming from you. And of course, the launch of the London Particular.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Same to you. Thank you very much.